All right. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. My name is Peggy O'Neill Vivanco. I am the Vermont Clean Cities Coalition Director. We are hosting this electric school bus peer exchange and would like to just explain briefly about the Clean Cities Coalitions, partnering with Granite State Clean Cities and Maine Clean Communities. Next slide, John. So we are directors of our coalitions. We're Department of Energy funded. So if you have specific questions about alternative fuels, any alternative fuels, you can look up either me in Vermont, John LeBeer in Granite State in New Hampshire, or Sarah Mills Knapp or John Gagne in Maine. Next slide. There we are three for the northern tier of New England, and we are three of over 75 active coalitions sponsored by Department of Energy. We collaborate on a lot of events because we're particularly interested in seeing how, in this case, electric technology is going to work in the heavy duty sector in our hilly and cold climates. Next slide. We are brand neutral and fuel agnostic, so we work across all alternative fuels to displace petroleum and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We work on idle reduction, fleet efficiencies, fleet analysis, and work with industry partners as well as businesses. And a lot of our work is education and outreach. Next slide. So for those who are new to Teams, you should see a banner across the top. So if you can click on the chat, which is on the upper left, and enter your name and organization, and then also use the chat as questions come up. And then we'll also be using that during the Q&A. Use the raise your hand feature during the question and answer session if you have a longer question or prefer to use that during the Q&A session instead of chat. And finally, right now, everyone is muted and no video. We can allow that once we get into the Q&A beyond these presentations. Next slide. So real quickly, our panelists who are really the experts, expert users in the electric school bus technology, will give a brief introduction about the buses, the electric school buses they have, any additional technology, whether it's bi-directional, where they're from, and high point and low point or challenge of the electric school bus technology. Really a brief overview. And then Jennifer Wallace-Broder from BEIC will also give some highlights on the electric school bus pilots. She's worked across the United States with fleet electrification. And then we're going to have a facilitated question and answer session. When you registered, many of you filled out the section on, what question you have about electric school buses. So we'll start with those questions. And as questions come up, please use the chat, and then we'll expand to the questions in the chat. And then finally, Gary Rennie from EPA Region 1, which is our region, will give an overview on the clean school bus funding. There was a clean school bus rebate program last year for which many of our school districts were successfully applied, as well as some of our third-party providers. And now there's a grant program this year. So we'll hear more about that from Gary, and then we'll have some closing, a little bit more information on tools and resources. Next slide. So let me start with our first introduction is Sean McKenzie from the South Burlington School District. He is joining us. He's the transportation coordinator from SB. And again, just very grateful to our school districts, the transportation folks, to be here. We know that there's a bus driver shortage. We know that it's the end of the school year and they're super tapped. So very grateful, Sean. If you'd like to start, go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you for inviting me. So we've run 4 buses for this school year. We had 2 starting in the beginning of the year, and the other 2 we got around January. I'll keep this brief so we can get to the questions. I would say a high point was even though we had the problems, we were able to solve all our problems in a reasonable amount of time, and we were able to share the information with everybody, everybody involved. We're all new to this, and we've been more than happy to share all the all the information that we have with everybody. I'd say one of our more challenging points was actually drivers, and not the lack of drivers, but I think drivers that drive regular buses, they kind of get into their own way of doing things. And with a new adventure like electric buses, they can be kind of quirky, and you got to kind of if you don't do things in a certain in a certain order, then you can have issues that way. They're simple to operate, yet very complex at the same time. And our buses, as it says, Highland Electric is basically our contractor for the buses and the charging units. We got our 4 buses are Thomas C2, the C2 platform.
Okay, thank you, Sean. All right, now next up, Barry from Champlain Valley Unified School District. Barry, you want to hit the wave tops on your electric school buses?
Okay, everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So we've had we have 2 in our fleet. We've had them going into 2.5 years now. So we've been through 2 full winters. We purchased the Lion, 77 passengers. We deal with Green Mountain Power. In general, the buses have worked well for us, except for charging issues. There's other little minor things that every buses would have. In the winter time, our biggest thing that we have done, which other people will question, is that we did order both of ours with alternative heating systems on them, so they do run the heat off of diesel, so we can keep our mileage up during the winter. So they're, again, just like was stated before, they are very easy but complex. Same thing, you got to do things in order. I basically designated them to certain drivers so that they, keep them running and keep after them as much as they can to work properly. And we have had some downtime, been very difficult to get service for them because there's not a lot of people out there yet that does all the service, but we've worked our way through it, and mostly they've stayed on the road. We've never had them off because of just a flat charging problem, just we haven't been able to use them as much if they don't charge overnight. But we're working on that problem with both the company, GMP, the charging company, to see if we can get that rectified.
Great. Thanks, Barry.
Awesome. And next is Eric from Mount Desert Island, who has certainly been leading the way up here in Maine with one of the first electric school bus adoptions. So excited to have Eric here.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, we've had electric bus. Our first one was about 2.5 years ago. Ours is also a Lion, and we applied for the EPA, and we got 2 new ones. We got a new one in February, and we got another one coming in June. We love them. I don't know how to explain it, but the only drawback that I find with them is the distance right now, because you can only go 125 miles. But our drivers are kind of fighting over them, to be honest with you. They don't want to drive the diesel, and rather do the electric. But unfortunately for us in the state of Maine, where we're at, we are still going to have to use diesel because of the distance, because we do go to Portland from Bar Harbor, and we travel, that's about 200 miles, a little over 200 miles. So the electric bus won't go that far. But that's all I can say right now till questions come up.
Great. Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
And we've also got Jennifer here from VEIC, who's been working with school districts and state agencies across the northern states in electric school bus adoption.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to hit some highlights of some of the projects that we've been supporting here in Vermont. We've been leading electric school bus projects since 2014 here at VEIC, and we evaluated the electric school bus on Mount Desert Island. So it's really nice to hear from you, Eric. And we also led the Massachusetts electric school bus demonstration project. So definitely had some great learnings from that. Today, I'm here to share preliminary findings from an electric school and transit bus pilot funded by the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation with Volkswagen settlement funds. And this project was implemented with 3 school districts. One of them you heard from, Barry, from Champlain Valley Supervisory Union, which for those of you who aren't from Vermont is what we would consider a suburban region. Most states would probably be considered more rural, but it's in the sort of greater Burlington area. We also worked with Franklin West Supervisory Union, which is located in Northwest Vermont, a pretty rural area. And we worked with Barry Unified Union School District, who has a contractor, Student Transportation of America, and they're located in central Vermont. And our project was really soup to nuts. We worked with each of these school districts through the selection process and then to implement and evaluate their projects. The things that we worked on together included vehicle and charging equipment procurement, installation of chargers, engagement with utility partners, vendor engagement, and troubleshooting service issues throughout the deployment. And then we evaluated the vehicle performance. So 2 of the school districts had their buses evaluated for 12 months and a third for 20 months. As you heard from Barry, each of the school districts procured 2 Type C school buses, and 2 districts selected Lion Bus and 1 selected Bluebird. As Peggy mentioned, the detailed findings of this pilot aren't public yet, but will be soon. So I'm just going to share high-level information about the performance and lessons learned from project implementation. So there was definitely some positive news of all of the electric school buses. They've realized fuel cost savings and emissions reductions over scrapped and new diesel buses. So we compared baselines to older diesel as well as a comparable new diesel that might have been purchased. In the best case, a single electric bus reduced fuel and maintenance costs by over $8,000 a year, while lowering greenhouse gas emissions by over 11 US tons annually. And that's about the equivalent of the weight of an empty school bus. So interesting comparison there. We did find that the base model battery configuration was sufficient to meet daily range requirements of the routes that the schools chose to operate the buses on. That was one thing we did work with the schools on early in the project, though. We wanted to make sure that the routes that they were planning could be supported by electric buses. So this might be a different story if they were going towards a full fleet electrification, but for the routes that the 2 buses were being operated on, there was really not too much trouble meeting those daily range requirements. So the daily average mileage in the Vermont project was about 32 to 75 miles. And nationally, it's about 66 miles. So we're right in the range of what might be typical route for a school district. The average range in the Vermont project over the evaluation period was 74 to 101 miles per charge. So midday charging could increase this significantly up to doubling it. Cold weather, everybody wants to know what happens in the winter. We saw about an average range reduction of up to 30%. All of the buses were operating with auxiliary diesel heaters. So if you are only operating on electric, you would see a greater reduction in range. And And then I do want to note on the very coldest days, say below 0, like -20, you could see up to a 50% reduction in range. We did see mixed reliability both between the buses and the chargers. So one bus had a perfect record. Barry, I don't know if that's still true, but one of the buses at Champlain Valley really was a star performer. But we did see other buses out for significant periods. Some of it was related to the chargers. We definitely saw persistent issues throughout the project with chargers at all sites. So that's just something I want to flag for folks. It's something you got to be thinking about and be prepared to address. A lot of people think about the bus and forget there's another very important piece of equipment that is important to operate your school buses, and those are the chargers. And we were frankly a little disappointed to see that those were sometimes sidelining operations. And then we also did see that service was sometimes inconsistent, that sometimes there was long waiting periods at service centers. It was sometimes hard to get parts. So that was kind of an inconsistency and something, again, that people should be aware of. We did, in general, find that the drivers and students like the buses. I think the biggest comment we got is that they're quiet. So it really changes the dynamic on the bus when kids are going to school. They're not yelling to be heard over the diesel engines, and it can just make for a calmer experience overall. Couple of additional observations. We did find there's a lot of interest in Vermont in electric school buses. We had a really good candidate pool to pick from for this pilot, and I think others would have applied, but they didn't have eligible vehicles. That was definitely a constraint that is a requirement of the VW settlement. The one other thing was that bus deliveries didn't always adhere to promised timelines. This may have been due to issues stemming from COVID. We did order our buses right in the middle of the pandemic. So as everybody recalls, there were supply chain and staffing shortages, but that was just something we experienced and was a little frustrating for our partners. Even with significant lead time and planning ahead for charging installation, it took longer than anticipated. We're all in northern states, so it's sometimes hard to put a shovel in the ground and put equipment in winter. So depending on the timing when equipment arrived, you might have to wait a few months until the ground softened to actually do the installation. You might want to time things for when students are off campus, like on a school break. And we did have some issues with getting chargers into the facilities in a timely manner. So there were a number of issues that just extended the timeline for that. We did find that school districts definitely need support to adopt electric buses. In some cases, it's just the additional capacity to manage the project and the issues that arise, but also just providing technical support and expertise. It's a new technology, and it's a lot to put on school districts that are already really stretched in many ways. And then the last thing is just a reminder that utilities are critical partners to support the project. They can help with multiple aspects of it, from helping to assess your facilities and what upgrades might be needed to support charging, assessing your electrical capacity, and even working with you on rates and understanding the impact of rate design on your fuel costs. So with that, really excited to share more information if there are questions, and look forward to the conversation.
Great, thanks, Jennifer, for that overview. I think that was really helpful and really sets the scene. And you know, one thing that we want to just reiterate is that this is a very new technology, especially in the Northeast. EV adoption will be a challenge as long as we remain a very cold region, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. And there are a lot of solutions and workarounds that school districts have found in adopting this technology. And we've got a really great group of experts here that have all been operating electric school buses in their districts, or have worked very closely with a school district in the Northeast that is currently operating an electric school bus. So just a reminder, if you have any questions specifically for any of our panelists today, you can type them right in the chat. Otherwise, we do have a list of questions that we received as folks registered. So we can start with those. And I've captured a few that have already come into the chat. So if anybody else has any more questions, just feel free to type them in, and then we will add them to the lineup.
So John, I think we should start maybe with the charging and infrastructure question, just kind of thinking about where Jen finished off there. So the first question I have is there any standard EV charging for school buses so that folks can streamline interconnection and upgrades? And maybe tied to that is, are there better chargers or companies to use for e-buses? Oh, you're muted, Jen.
Somebody was going to do that. It was me. So anyway, the charging, there was a couple of things I'd like to point out about charging. First of all, the school districts, one school district was using a level 2 charger. It was a 16.6 kW, which is a pretty standard level 2 charger. And then we also had school districts that were using what we would call sort of mid-power DC chargers at about 22.5 and 24 kilowatt hours. That's a little bit different than what you would consider a fast charger, which would have much higher power. We found that these are definitely sufficient to charge the buses. I don't think there's any issues with interconnection like you might see with like a Tesla charger, quite frankly, in a personal vehicle, not working with others. So I think there was a couple of lessons that we learned in terms of the procurement. We would tend to recommend that you procure your charger separate from the bus procurement. We found in a couple of cases, we were trying to streamline things and have the buses and the chargers procured together. In some cases, the bus vendors were suggesting particular charging companies they said would work well with their equipment. And when it came to then having, if there were issues with the chargers, it was sometimes hard to like know who was on first to fix that. Like, do you go to the bus vendor? Do you go to the charging equipment vendor? And we really felt like there might be a little bit more accountability on some of the charging issues if those were procured separately from the buses. I don't know if other folks who are working on these projects that presented earlier have thoughts about that, but that was one thing that we're thinking might help with some of the maintenance issues that we saw arising with the chargers. It does add a step in the process, but it may result in some better service over the long run. But interested in what others think about that.
Yeah, Eric, go ahead, and then Barry and Sean, if you want to jump in as well.
For us, for the charger, I mean, we've had our first bus actually for 3 years now, and it's a low end, it's a level 1, and we had no problems with it. And the way we do it is that they go for their run in the morning, and then we plug it in. I mean, they could do the whole run through the whole day, but we plug it in when they come back at 9 o'clock, and then they take it again around 2 o'clock, and then when they come back, they charge it. It's a low level one. I've been doing that for 3 years, and it's fine. But with the new chargers that we found that we got on these next 2 buses, is that when the electrician went into the panels, even though we have 3-phase coming into the school, they could not do the level 3 chargers unless we opted to turn around and get a bigger panel and stuff like that. So those are the obstacles that we ran across. And be honest with you, so we had to go down to a level 2 charger. We have not got them installed because we had some parts issues also, because one of the circuit breakers had to be at 125 amps. And so that was on back order, and now we had to go down to 100 amp, but we had to take the charger down a level in order to get the charger to definitely work. So we're not waiting till because the bus is due on June 22nd, and between them having time to get out here and having the part and so on, we had to wait. But other than that, with the low level one, we've had no issues for 3 years with that charging. If that helps.
No, I think that's great. The charging is like its own ecosystem. Barry or Sean, do you have any comments on charging and infrastructure that you experience with your buses?
Yeah, I'll kind of reiterate the same thing. So we do have 2 different chargers. So our original charger when we first got the buses was a low level charger. We since had those removed and they put us in the level 2 chargers. We then purchased another charger and put it on over at our shop. The low level charger again works perfectly fine. It takes a lot longer to charge, but you know, for what it does, it works fine. When we went to the other ones to get a quicker charge, we've just experienced the problems of what happens with them is they kick off a lot. And not all of the time, but a fair amount. So you'll plug it in, it'll tell everything is looking good, it starts charging, and then, you know, it might be 15 or 20 minutes later, drivers have gone home, it kicks off. So you come back in the morning and it's not fully charged. We do plug them in as soon as we come back during the day. We're able to charge them all day with the rate that we're on at the moment, which is supposed to change, I think, this year, which will cause a little more money issue. But if it isn't right now, I've been dealing with all of the people involved. They're ABB chargers. That company plus GMP have been going back and forth trying to figure out why they keep doing that. Their sense is that there's some kind of fluctuation in the power, and if there is any fluctuation at all, it automatically kicks them off.
That's helpful, thanks. And then Sean, if you want to talk about your charging, but also maybe explain a little bit, because South Burlington has the bi-directional vehicle to grid, which was actually part of the whole package. Sean, I did help write the grant for SB. So if you could just explain a little bit more of the nuances with your system, that would be great.
Yeah, I know, excuse me, I know a lot of, you know, I've heard from other people and heard online, and that's I think the biggest challenge for people is the charging. And I think the important thing to do is to you got to maybe get something a little more than you think you would need for charging. We have 4 chargers, 2 are Proterra and 2 are Rhombus, and they're all 4 of them are 60 kilowatt chargers. So and they don't even run at 60, they run around 50, 52. So they're, you know, they're more than what is needed. And like she was saying, the other end of that is they're set up for B2G, or B2G as they call it too, is a vehicle to grid. Is that the power company is able to, and they have done some events, and they did one actually in the winter time that was very successful. It was a day that was like 14 below, wind chill was really high, and they were actually able to discharge the electricity from the buses and put it back into the grid, and then we're able to switch it back over and recharge the buses after the event. And this is something that doesn't currently I don't think happens very much in Vermont, and I'm pretty sure that Green Mountain Power is trying to get more businesses, companies, whatever, to do that. So definitely I think that would be an incentive to other people to contact Green Mountain Power about that.
Great, thank you. Next question. Maybe performance. So we're in the cold north, even though it's almost 90 today. So looking at our cold climate and range and heat, you all mentioned some of the range issues. What are what's the general kind of route that you feel like you can use this bus on in the winter? And I guess also indicate, because I think, Barry, do you all, I guess, indicate if you have the auxiliary heater that is diesel powered as well, and what that does for your range in the winter?
Yeah. So the research that we did before we got them is that was kind of explained to us through Lion, so we went ahead and had them install the diesel. Basically, it's a diesel furnace, and they give off great heat, and we might lose maybe 10% of our mileage in the wintertime. So the other ones that I've heard around, that don't have them, struggle pretty hard. They get down to almost half of their mileage or less taken away. So they heat great, but it's kind of an odd thing to have a bus that says all electric on it and have a diesel furnace in it. But we felt that without it, we just wouldn't be able to handle the winters and get enough mileage out of them. So they just wouldn't make them worth the effort.
Barry, a quick follow-up. How much diesel do you use for your heater per winter season? Do you have that?
I don't have that info.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to ask like the SAT question. But anyway, I think that's kind of helpful for us to think about, that we do need this supplemental heating. I know there's diesel, there's propane, and then they're just thinking it's a lesser quantity than it is using the school bus, but to get a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they usually were, I think it's like a little 10-gallon tank. I don't even know if they were filling up once a week, if that, to run them. So.
Okay, great. And then Sean or Eric, any other comments on the heating and range in winter?
I agree with Barry because we have Lion too also, and it does about 10%. But I can't remember. I think it's not often because it is about a 10-gallon tank, but it's not very often that they have to fill them up. I don't know how many times, but I know it's not once a week, but it's a lot less than that.
Yeah, on the Thomas buses that we have, it's an electric heater, and they do work. They work really, really well. Within maybe 10 minutes, you've got really good heat. So in the winter, we're looking at calculations were anywhere from 40 to sometimes, depending on how cold it is, you may have a 50% reduction in mileage because of running the heaters, running the fans, everything. Yeah, so that's been a challenge.
So then, Sean, what's if you're using those electric heaters on your buses instead of the diesel ones, what's your duty cycle? What's your the distance of the routes that you travel on with your buses, with your electric buses?
So actually total, we're looking at, they're in the 50 to 55 mile range. They're, in town routes. And like I said, with even in the winter, with having a route in the morning and a route in the afternoon, we're able to charge them up during the day. So we don't, we haven't had an issue of not being able to get them, charged back up. It's just like you said, you are kind of limited to, to what you can do in the winter.
John Gagne, you want to see what questions are up next there?
Yeah, so sticking on the topic of performance and range, cold climates obviously impact the range a lot, but so can hilly climates. So what is like the bus performance like for drivers? Maybe you guys can talk a little bit more about the regenerative braking and how it handles our very hilly climate up here in the Northeast, and how that might impact range a bit.
I'll go first. So the range doesn't affect it, from what I understand from the bus drivers. But the only thing is that when they do go and they stop at a hill, and when you go to press on the gas, not gas, but when you press on the pedal, it does take a little time to go up that hill after you come to a complete stop to get going. You're not going to be able to go, very, very fast. But other than that, because we are hilly, like you said, it's forms very well.
Yeah, sometimes, that could be also a benefit with the regenerative braking, adding some miles to your range. Yeah, curious to hear about the others and how like driver training maybe has gone as well with getting used to the difference in the new bus.
I can just weigh in just a little bit on the findings from the project. First of all, in terms of the evaluation, and sort of disentangling contributors like terrain versus weather, it's a pretty challenging thing to do to see what might be contributing to any range reduction. So I think that's probably a project for a much maybe bigger sample size, and some consistent comparisons with routes. It's just hard to do with a small sample size and varied routes and etc. But I would say when it came to the regenerative braking, one of the things we found is when you start the day, and I think that everybody wants to be really diligent about making sure you're 100% topped off with your battery, maybe when you start your day. But if you want to really get the full benefit of regenerative braking, you actually have to have someplace for that power to go. So what we found is that when the buses have used up some of their range, that's when you really get the benefit of the regenerative braking. So just something to think about. It's probably a much more nuanced, I would say, practice. But if you start your day a little less than 100% battery capacity, you are going to get more benefit over the full course of your routes from the regenerative braking. But as I said, it might be something that people are uncomfortable starting the day without 100%. But you got to have some place for the power to go, basically. So just.
I'm going to jump in quick and add. So one thing that we learned, we did a demonstration up north over the winter, and one of the things that was learned is that driver training is super important when it comes to the regenerative aspect of the system. In that, when one driver used it on a particular route, starting at 100% with a 30-mile round trip, they came back and they had used I think it was like 22 miles of range or whatever, and it was a hilly 30-mile range or circle. And then but somebody who was trained on how to properly drive the bus with the regenerative braking in that same loop, out of the 30 miles, they only used up about 14 miles of range as far as the battery was concerned. So I think as as folks move forward, just getting the bus alone is not enough. I think you have to really invest in making sure that the people who are going to be using them are properly trained on the features, characteristics, the driving characteristics, and how to most effectively use the resources available.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and going to be essential to incorporate driver training and extending the range and a successful adoption in the Northeast here. And speaking of successful adoption in the Northeast, electric school buses can be kind of expensive. Thankfully, we have the EPA Clean School Bus Program, which helps offset the cost. But oftentimes the school district will still need to get a lot of community buy-in from their school boards, and, communicate the benefits of like why they're adopting an electric school bus. I was wondering if all of the school districts can talk a bit more about what that experience has been like, how the reaction has been from both the community, but also the school districts themselves. And I know we've heard great things from the drivers and the students driving or riding the buses. But what's sort of the engagement process that you guys went through to get these buses to your schools?
Well, this school here, MDI, we have solar panels. We have chargers on the property already for individual cars. This area here is very green and very excited about what we're doing. I mean, we've been displaying the electric buses at different in Bar Harbor, different events, I should say. People are very interested in it. We have another upcoming one for the superintendents in the state of Maine. We're going to be displaying that. So a lot of people here are very excited about it, from what I understand. I mean, you do have people that do say certain things that are really not true. Like rumor is that when we got our bus 3 years ago, that it was towed all the way to Toronto, and saying, no, the bus has been here. The other one was that it costs you $5,000 a month to run this bus, and that's not true either. I mean, I don't have the exact figure. I did before, but not right now. But it doesn't cost that much. But if that's any indication, I think this is where we got to go. And I do hope we can figure out the distance-wise. That's my biggest thing. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, definitely. And here in Maine, we've definitely heard a lot about Mount Desert Island sort of leading the way in electric school bus adoption, which has been really great. And then curious to hear from you, Barry and Sean, as well, on how it's been going. And obviously, it seems like you guys have been also very successful in getting school buses to your districts. So great to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, so our kind of the same thing, that Eric and, we're very green here. We're, the community is excited about it. We take them to any event that they ask us to come to, to show them off. And, so the people are excited. Our biggest question has been, mileage would be one thing, but, the other is just how do we expand, what do we do with the grid system, when they want us to replace 15 of them all at once, if I can't, so people, us inside, worry about the chargeability of keeping them all out on the road so that I don't have to keep a lot of spares around. But as far as the community goes, they're all very excited about them. They love them. The kids love them. And whenever we go to the events, they really are a big hit. So, we're excited to, same thing, to keep going with them. We're just kind of, not completely both feet in until we can see some changes that'll allow us to, have the grid work properly, chargers work properly, so that we can be satisfied and can, trust them out there every day.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with both of them, and I think the important thing too is that what they did here in South Burlington is that I wasn't involved initially in the research process, but I know they definitely they took their time. It wasn't something that they just somebody told them about an electric bus and 1 week later they were ordering one. I haven't heard a lot of positive stuff. I've never heard anything negative about them. I think everyone, has been excited about it. The drivers are excited about it. The community seemed to, to be excited, and we as well try to get them out to, any event that we can, that we can highlight them through.
Awesome. Yeah. Community engagement is definitely going to be a big one. And, they're big investments, but they seem to be very well received, which is really great to see. We did have a couple questions specifically about the issues with like supply chain and maintenance and ordering parts. Jennifer, I wonder if you are able to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah. So we're actually in the report, there'll be sort of an overview of like the categories of service issues that were addressed during the project. So I would definitely recommend folks take a look at that when it comes out. There'll be just sort of an overview. I think sometimes it was hard to get parts, and I just want to remind everybody this project was implemented through a significant period of COVID. So it's hard to tell if that's going to be typical or if there was just supply chain issues that everybody experienced in many sectors of the economy during that period. But the buses had, what I would call typical bus issues. One bus was off because a rock hit the mirror and it took a little while to fix that. Like there's, some things happen on buses like they do on cars, and that can take a little time to fix. We did have, I would say, the service center that was servicing one of the school districts was really slow in addressing issues sometimes. And I'm not totally clear on whether that they needed more support or if they just really backed up in general. So, when we went into this project, we had a theory that being in proximity to a service center that worked on your buses might improve the service experience. But I don't know that that was actually borne out through this project. So again, I'm really interested in the experience that others who are in the trenches on this have had with that. But that, I think we're really trying to think through like what's the best recommendation. There is, a service network isn't always going to be the saving grace for addressing issues on your buses. So just wanted to flag that as something I think we want to pay more attention to, is how do you get quicker resolution to some of the issues that do crop up?
Good point. I mean, that's a workforce question for sure. But Eric, you want to jump in? Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Am I better now?
Perfect.
Yeah, when we first got the first bus, we had the only biggest issue because of the supply chain was, believe it or not, was the oil that we needed, or some kind of special oil from Canada. But unfortunately, at that time, they couldn't get it across the border. So we had a big issue, and that was the only issue. We've had some other issues with both the buses, but we've got a recent gentleman that's pretty much on call and can, when we have an issue, he's here, within a week at least, if not earlier. So that side of it's been going very well. But I really, I want to mention this again, is that, not again, but I mean, I mentioned this to other people that I've talked to in the state of Maine, is that we need to train the diesel mechanics to be able to operate these, to fix these. The reason why I say that is because half their business or a portion of their business is going to go away because of electrical. And I'm hoping that a lot of the electric companies, bus companies, are trying to, go into those areas and be able to help us, instead of hiring a whole new set of group of people, that's my feeling is that, we're going to put these guys out of business, or their business is going to go, less, they'll have less business. So, but other than that, we've been much better at what we're doing now. So,
Barry or Sean, any comments on kind of workforce or training or access to the parts that you need, or the service required for your buses?
Yeah, we had parts issues like, I think, like everybody else did through COVID, and I think even now it's still there are still some parts that are hard to get. We're lucky enough to, with the Thomas platform, the company we bought it through already has kind of mechanics in place that are traveling mechanics for the diesel buses. So out of our own, not fault, but our own problems that we've had with our electric buses, the mechanics are now learning, are learning the nuances of the electric buses. So they're now getting hands-on training to be able to deal with any issue that comes up.
Thanks. Barry, anything to add?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. We do have, so for the Lion side of it, when we have a problem there, it's a guy that comes out of Massachusetts. A little difficult to get him at times, but we have one of our own mechanics that is kind of, he's taken a lot of interest in the whole process. He has worked with some other city buses as well before he came to us, so he's got some idea. And on some of the parts, agreed, I didn't know 100% whether it was the fact that we were dealing outside the states to get parts in because it had to come from Canada. I do know that they supposedly have a plant that they're opening in Indiana, so maybe that'll help us out in getting parts. The regular maintenance on them was almost nothing. The little things that went wrong weren't all that difficult. It was mostly the computer issues that we would have. And when we ran into that problem, there was just very limited who could come in and figure out what was going on.
Thanks. So there was one question I see in the chat that someone kind of reminded, and this is really for Sean because you have the bidirectional. How does it work? Does GMP pay you for the power that you discharge back to the grid from your bus? How does that work? And I guess, and then also for all of you, how do you monitor your charging on your buses? Can you do it remotely, or must you go out to the vehicles when they charge? So I guess Sean first, and then everybody about the monitoring the charging.
So I don't know exactly how the pricing works with that. I do know that they can do, they can do that remotely, and they have done that remotely several times, and they can even schedule a a draw from the system. What was the other question again?
Is there a way to monitor your charging? You know how like if you have charge point, you can like look at your phone and you're charging your car and how much. So can you do that with the buses too, so that you don't have to go out to the bus barn all the time?
Right. Yeah. So through Highland Electric, they have we have a dashboard that we have, and I've got it on a monitor in the office, and we can look at the all four buses. We can look at the state of charge, the percentage where it is. It'll let us know if it's charging or if it's not, for some reason the charger itself isn't functioning, so we can go out and and fix the issue. So the answer with that is yes, and actually the dashboard does give us a little bit more information than just the just the state of charge. We can actually track where they are. It's not real time, but you just refresh, it'll tell you, on a map, it'll show you exactly where the bus is.
Okay. All right. And then I guess real quick from Eric and Barry, and then we're going to head to Gary Rennie from the EPA so he can talk quickly about the funding. So
for monitoring, I don't have any dashboard. There's probably one out there. Haven't really worked with it. We primarily just plug them in, let them go. Because we only have two. I don't know, Sean, how many do you have? How many buses do you have again?
We have 4.
Yeah, we only have 2 right now. So no monitoring here for me. And again, we got solar panels that take up, that actually do a lot of help with electricity for that too. So.
Yeah, and I'm the same here as Eric. I don't have a monitoring system. I, have looked into it a couple times, but I haven't found anything yet that'll allow me to monitor myself. They seem to be able to monitor them, the companies, but I don't have any dashboard. That would be great, so I wouldn't have to, I could actually know if they were off or not.
Great. So any questions that didn't get answered that are still in the chat, we can go ahead and, farm them out to folks to respond to them. But next up, because we only have a few minutes left, Gary Rennie from the EPA is going to give us the highlights of the EPA Clean School Bus funding.
Thanks, Peggy. Can you hear me? You see the presentation?
Yep, you're not in presentation mode though. So I see.
Oh, interesting. There we go.
There you go. Perfect.
That should. Yeah. So thank you again for letting me speak today to our friends to the north. Happy to be here. Just want to give you a really quick overview of the 2023 Clean School Bus Grant Program. As you recall, last year was the rebate program where we gave out almost $1 billion. This year, for the first part of this year, is this NOFO, where $400 million is available nationwide. And it is a grant program, so it's going to be competitively scored, evaluated and scored each application. Region 1, so all of New England, has anticipated funding of 27 million and change to award out of this program. The little different from the rebate program, this program is basically broken down into 2 sub-programs. So one for school districts to apply directly to the program, and another sub-program is third-party applicants. And I'll go into the details of these two, but these are 2 important distinctions between how applicants are going to apply. And same, we have electric school buses, propane, CNG buses available or eligible, as well as infrastructure. Again, we are focusing on disadvantaged communities, as one aspect of this program, but also some areas that are in the NAAQS non-attainment areas are somewhat of a focus as well. But that's northern region doesn't really apply to that, but they will be eligible to apply under this program. I want to get into the details of the 2 sub-programs for a minute. I know there's a lot of folks that smaller school districts can be somewhat discouraged from applying to the program. The school district program, we have a minimum requirement of 15 buses, up to 50 buses. Under this program, we're looking for school districts to apply directly that have basically large fleets. So we're looking for single large fleet turnovers in this sub-program. A lot of the smaller school districts, say in northern New England, they would probably be better served under the third-party sub-program. That's where each school district does not have to have, you can apply for, say, 1 bus or up to, say, 25 or more. The difference here is an eligible third-party contractor would apply on behalf of the school district. So you could have a school transportation service provider apply on behalf of your small school district. Say you had 2 buses, that's fine, as long as that third-party applicant or the third-party nonprofit school transportation association or dealer or whoever it may be, they would have to apply on behalf of 4 districts. So there has to be a total combined of at least 4 school districts as part of their application, and that combined has to be 25 buses out of the 4 school districts, up to 100 buses. So this is where, we're targeting smaller communities that don't have that minimum 15 bus fleet, but also smaller communities that don't have the resources to actually apply to the program. So they're relying on a third party to apply on their behalf. The prioritization criteria is similar to the rebate program. We're still looking at the SAPI index as one qualification for prioritized area, and that is 20% or more of the students living in poverty, ages 5 to 17 years old. There's also some other criteria if you're a Title I funded public school, and you can, if you're not listed on the SAPE index, you can self-certify. We have a form on our website to do that. We're also looking at rural districts, which is similar to the rebate program. Rural remote this time around. Before it was rural remote and rural distant. So right now we're looking at rural remote as a criteria that would basically allow you to apply as a prioritized area. If you meet any one of these that are listed here, you will be considered prioritized and you'll get additional funding. And those funding levels are similar to the rebate program. However, this time around, if you look on this more or less the top left where you see class 7 plus buses, we have up to $395,000 will be the award. That is for the bus and the charging infrastructure combined. Before in the rebate program, we had it separate. We had, the $375 for the bus and then the $20,000 for the infrastructure. Now we're combining that pot, and it'll be up to the awardee or applicant to decide how they want to spend those dollars. All on a bus and zero on charging, or mix it up, bus and charging, whatever percentage you feel. And there's more details that are outlined in the NOFO for that, the notice of funding opportunity. And then you'll see the sliding scale here as it, depending on the bus size and also whether or not you're prioritized or not prioritized based off that criteria I just went over. So it's pretty self-explanatory there. Some of the important dates, the NOFO went out in April, end of April. You have up until August 22nd to submit your applications. We really encourage folks to, start early. The NOFOs are, pretty extensive. We encourage folks, if you are interested, really try to address every criteria outlined in that NOFO. It's really important to try to answer every criteria that's asked. Even if you don't, meet it, you still should try to address it in the application. We are, looking to basically go over those and notify folks between November and January of next year. And then the awards are looking at sometime spring of next year is when these awards will go out. We only have a handful of awards this time around because we have $27 million, and we're not talking at $400,000 per bus. We're not talking a lot of awards. So if folks are not interested in this particular grant program right now, we will have the fall 2023 Clean School Bus Rebate Program again coming online. That we think is going to be around $600 million available to sort of make up bring it up to $1 billion for this year. So stay tuned for that. That'll be similar to last year. So some of these small school districts, 1 or 2 page application, pretty easy to submit. Here, just some information on what you should consider. Start planning your now. We heard a lot about that today. Infrastructure is hugely important. We have the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. That's driveelectric.gov. We have folks there. It's a partnership with EPA that really will walk you through your entire build out and your range, your routing, et cetera. It's a great service that they're providing for folks in this program. As always, go to the website epa.gov/cleanschoolbus. We'll have several webinars scheduled. We have one today on the application process at 1 o'clock today. So just visit epa.gov/cleanschoolbus to sign up for register for those webinars. Here's the Region 1 Clean School Bus team, myself and my other colleagues, B, Rini, and Laura, that can help you out with any questions you might have as well. So that's sort of the lightning round presentation. Let me stop presenting here, Peggy. Sorry for going over.
No, thank you, Gary. Yeah, we saved the best for last. Yeah, John Gagne, you want to wrap up? I know that we went over and I'm really sorry about that, but there were lots of good questions. I think we probably could have gone for an hour and a half, but really wanted to kind of keep things tight. So thank you for staying on, and we will share all these resources with you. John Gagne.
Yep. All right, great. So before we wrap up, just want to give everyone a quick reminder about the state DERA programs. in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. We can send the links directly to each of these pages, and this funding can be used to help offset some of the cost of a replacement of a diesel bus. And it doesn't necessarily replace the cost of the entire bus, but definitely can make it a little bit more price competitive. And then there's also the EPA DERA state grant programs, and this is just some who are the eligible applicants for this: local, state, and regional agencies or departments, businesses, institutions, and nonprofit organizations operating in the states. Up to 45% funding for eligible diesel replacements. And then, as always, we just want to flag that as part of the Clean Cities Network, we have access to a variety of technical response and technical assistance resources available to all of you guys. So we have the Technical Response Service, which is a really great resource that all of us use in the Clean Cities Network. We can send sort of any question to them, and they will give us more than enough information to address that question. And then we also have the Tiger Teams, which is more of a expert technical assistance group that can help with these projects. And then just really quick, highlighting some resources on the Alternative Fuel Data Center website. Great place to stay up to date with all the laws and incentives at the federal and state level, look at various case studies, do some vehicle searches, and there's also some great fleet analysis calculators and tools. And last but not least is just a quick thank you for joining us here today. This has been a really great discussion. We had a lot of really great questions and a ton of amazing panelists join us today. So thank you for your time and sharing your expertise with school districts across the Northeast. This is our contact information to get in contact with your local Clean Cities organization, and we will send out a copy of the recording and slide deck to everybody that registered today. And if you have any additional questions, send them our way, and we will make sure that they get to the right person. So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thanks all, and thank you, presenters. Really appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.